from the Iceberg with a GrandPolar, coming to you over the Ethernet and into your ears.
Well, let's start. Let's tell us about Fiene and Niovel.
Okay, so my name is Fiene. How did it start? Well, it's you could like do the short version as like one day we wrote a song and then we wrote another one and then we ended up with an album. I think the long version is a little bit like Simon, my co-band member, and we met almost like 15 years ago now, like a long time ago, when we were both very young. And we actually met through music and wrote some songs back in the day, but we never really got past the sort of like, oh, we have a song now kind of stage, right? Like it was kind of like we did a demo and things, but it wasn't like it never progressed to a level where we would actually show it to someone. And then like I don't know, life happened, we got busy, I got the job and so on and so forth, and we didn't do any music for I think 10 years, maybe longer. And then during the first lockdown we started meeting for walks every Friday. And so we would see each other much more regularly and spend a lot more time together again. And then towards the end of that first year, 2020, on one of those walks, I just started writing like the way we do it or used to do it is like I would just write random lyrics on sheets of paper, kind of, I would sit down and write something. And then when I show it to Simon, he can kind of play some music to it almost immediately. So when I hand him a sheet of paper with some text on it, he just starts doing things on the piano and then music happens. I don't know how he does that, but it just works. And that very first song, we actually never finished like that. It just didn't sound like it was a very poppy kind of number, and it just didn't sound, we couldn't get it to sound good. And then but somehow we just kept writing, and then Simon wrote the first single off of the album is also the first song that he then wrote after that, I think, if I'm correct, which was Straight at Its Face. And somehow that was like putting on the faucet and stuff kept pouring out. And then we kind of like, we got Straight at Its Face ready, and we released a very embarrassing sort of like very first version actually in December 2020 to our Facebook friends. I have since removed as well. It was a very steep learning curve from there on, but like now it's kind of like, I mean, now with the internet and all the information that is available to you, and also having more resources, we're actually grown-up people now. We have some money that we can spend on the music. We have some money we can, buy gear with and take classes with, like, and sort of like pay people to work with us. So that made it a lot easier to actually like make the music sound much better. And then that was kind of like how it all started. And from there, we just started writing more and more material. And the difficult thing with the first album was that I was recording the vocals while we were still writing stuff. So I kind of had to learn all the songs and like was recording them as they were like basically fresh, hot off the press, so to speak. And I am like, I used to work in digital marketing. So like my favorite way to learn about things is to like listen to podcasts or read a book. So I then went out and sort of went like, okay, so now we have a real song. How do I actually get this out? Like, how do I do that? I had no idea what was involved. And so I listened to an audiobook, and there was this one great quote that I remember that really helped me a lot, which was like, you can get anyone to work on their music if you can pay them, like anyone in the world. And so that sort of like I realized, okay, there is no secret there is no secret. You just ask people, and then, you know, they say yes or no, and then like they do the work for you. And so I reached out to actually one of the I think it's one of the most famous symphonic metal studios, or used to be one of the studios that did a lot of symphonic metal in Germany, which is Gate Studio, which with Sasha Ped and Miro, who produced a lot of the albums, tons of the albums that like were Simon's early influences. So I basically just reached out to them and was like, they had a website up with like, we do mastering services, and I was like, well, can you help us? And they said yes. So and that like really helped us kind of make it presentable in a sense. But at the core, it's just Simon and I started doing it, and then it kind of worked. We were very surprised, I think, that it worked. I'm still surprised every time we write a song, because there is this fear that like one day it's just gonna run out. Like, you know, you don't have any songs left or something like that. But so far that hasn't happened. And from like a why is it an album perspective, I felt like we had so much material, but also it's like a really nice sort of it's a really nice thing to make and then say you're finished. Right? Like if you just kind of make songs one after another, it's this endless thing of like just making things. And I think the ambition to turn it into an album and actually sort of curate things and make it into this very presentable sort of structure. Also the album structure itself, right? Like it's kind of like it has a set length, sort of, you know, you have certain requirements, you have to look a bit at pacing and like what kind of songs and stuff. It also lets you showcase a little bit more variety in a sense, but like that really helped us kind of stay and keep at it, because you can't just have an album with just one song. You know, I think if we hadn't had the goal of making an album very soon, we might not have been as diligent as we were in moving things forward. So, and then like that was throughout 2021, then like we spent a lot of time recording and writing and things. And then finally we were actually ready to release the album in, I think, December, November. We finished in November and then released it in December, because again, it's like you could wait for a better time, but it was our first album. Nobody knew us anyway. There was nothing to point to except the 2 singles. So you kind of have to build like a little bit of the first thing basically. And by the end, we just wanted it like, okay, we wanted it to be like done within the year basically. We were like, rather do it in December than like after the Christmas break, sort of having to gather all your energy again and sort of, yeah. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, there's never really the best time to release an album. People always say you should do it before Christmas because people are buying Christmas, but those times have changed. I mean, people are buying music all the time now. So
yeah, and I'm like, I've talked to other musicians. I'm like in a very wonderful community of like other startup musicians who are trying to figure this out, but also more experienced ones. And everybody agrees. It's like, yeah, people say like release it on a Friday or release it on a Tuesday or whatever. Like that's the industry standard, but nobody really cares anymore. And people have had freak successes also. Like there was this one guy who was like, I know what the current like best advice is, but my best release was between Christmas and New Year's one year. So like, you know, when everybody was supposed to be in a food coma, that's when I had like a really good thing going. So we just like now we just do it when it's finished. Basically, like when the album is finished or when the song is finished, then we kind of look into like, okay, then from there on it takes like 6 to 8 weeks to do the whole other stuff that you need to do. But then yeah, it was a big learning curve. Yeah.
How did you get started in music? Where did your musical influences come from?
So there is a really nice bit on our website that you should look at. There is like a little bit of a Q&A section where Simon answers precisely this question in a very comical way. So I got started in music from a very early age. I actually played piano since I was 6 years old. I don't play anymore. Well, I've recently gotten it back into playing, but I for the longest time didn't do anything with it. But until I was 16, I was actually in like music education and classical music education, and also sang classically. Um, and so that's how I got into music. Simon's answer to this question would be Mario Paint Composer. That's how he got into music, that and video games. So, and he taught himself. Like he just sat down at the piano, he sits down and just plays. And then of course, like he's has, I think, almost no formal music education, but always really loved music. And he's the one who's always been making music. And I'm the one who's always only been playing like other people's music, really. And then he has helped me sort of like realize that I can make music too, right? I can write things too. So.
And why did you go down the symphonic rock metal route?
That's a good question. I don't know. He likes it. I think so. Like from a sort of writing perspective, we have other songs as well. Like we have things that sound like very poppy, or I mean, it's like I always tease him and say like one day I want to make a country album, or like we should do some Schlager. Really, I think I'd be really good at Schlager, to be honest. But it's what he listened to growing up. Like he actually really got into these first Luca Turilli albums. And then like there was Camelot was a thing, but before that there was another like Luca Turilli, and then I mean there was Avantasia, right? And all of these things he was already listening to when I met him. So he's always liked that style of music, or at least since he discovered it, and since it was a thing, basically since it pioneered. And I actually really came to appreciate it over the years. Like I adore the skill that is involved. Like from the vocalist perspective, it's so interesting. But also you get to be a little bit dramatic. You get to be a little bit versatile as well. Like on the album, I think that like I get to use like almost the full vocal range of my voice. I get to use a lot of different sounds and things. And it's very challenging also, but also it's just fun. Like it's really fun to make that kind of music, and fun to listen to for us. Like I think if you have like an inkling for video games or like video game music, especially in the RPGs or things like that, if you enjoy that, then that's what like, yeah. So I think that it's a really fun thing to do, and it's, yeah. And I mean, we don't only do this. I mean, like, I don't know, Emerald Divide is a piano ballad, right? So like you can and like some of them have like different, I think, undertones as well, I would call it, right? They're not all straight power metal. They're all definitely influenced, but some of them you could like have as just a rock song, right? Like some of them are pretty just like rock songs. You could say it's a rock song, or a pop rock song.
But people like to have a little box.
yeah, I think that's very useful though. I think it's very useful because it's like if I think about myself, how I shop for things, or how I select things, how I look for things, right? It's kind of like, well, if I'm in the mood for like something symphonic metal or something, is best music for tidying up, I think. Then like, you look for that specifically, and even if you find something like a little bit adventurous then in the genre, still you need to know where to look. So I think like calling it symphonic metal, I mean, it's very interesting because I think musically it's more power metal than symphonic, but I cannot think of a single power metal band with a female vocalist. So my theory is now that basically if it's a male vocalist, it's power metal. If it's a female vocalist, it's symphonic metal.
That's actually not a bad theory.
That was my observation, because like from everything I tested, like I also tested like how do people like this, and how do people like on Facebook kind of like how do they respond, and basically every time I called it symphonic metal, they were like, yeah, clear, okay, I know what that is, at least the Europeans. And then if I say like it's power metal, then they were very confused about the girl singer. So I'm kind of like, I think it's a little bit like that. And then in the US it's different again, because they don't know either very well. So like they are not very, like if I show my husband is American, for example, if I show him the music, he's like, well, I don't know. Sounds a bit like Evanescence, but that's like the closest he can kind of.
Yeah. Although there are quite a few American bands now coming out with proper symphonic metal, and that I've actually just been interviewing, and there's one maybe you want to listen to. They're called Shaylon.
Yeah. Can you spell that for me? I'm just going to write that down real quick.
Shaylon.
Shaylon, yes.
Look them up and listen to their music.
Yeah, I will. Because
the lead singer, she's very, very classical.
Yeah.
And they've just come up with it's not symphonic rock or symphonic metal, it's symphonic modern music.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, I would like to, I'm definitely going to give them a listen.
Which is more where you are. You're not like, when people hear the words rock and people hear the words metal, that's a box.
Yeah, I think especially with the metal one, like, I think that some people always say, oh, there has to be more drums for it to be metal, or there has to be more guitars or whatever. And then it's like, then I look at the bands that I really love, and I think like, well, I mean, Tobias Sammet's songs are not always heavy on drums or heavy on guitars. He has ballads as well, and we still say it's power metal. Blind Guardian has super nice sort of like slower tempo songs, and they're not all the same. So I'm kind of like, but it's like you hear what you want to hear, right? It's kind of like, it's difficult. I think that if I say it's symphonic metal, it's like a good starting point. When I look for people who like symphonic metal or power metal, I know that I have like a 50% chance or higher that they will enjoy it, basically.
And bands like Visions of Atlantis, Within Temptation, Nightwish.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like Within Temptation and Nightwish are like huge here, obviously. Seen them both, love them both, absolutely adore. I mean, I think that Sharon of Within Temptation, she's like one of the most outstanding vocalists that I have ever witnessed. Like, she's so confusing. She sounds live almost exactly like on the record. Like, she's absolutely outstanding and also very recognizable, very unique in what she does. And I think Floor is just she's amazing. Like, she has and she can do both. I really admire that about her. Like, I really like how, for Nightwish anyway, like she does both, because Nightwish had these two very distinct phases with Tarja and Annette. So I like that Floor can do both. And I know that there is a lot of like operatic singing in symphonic metal, and for me it's like I have classical training. I could sound more operatic sometimes, I do, but I only do it when it's like written that way, basically, right? Like, there are some parts on the first album, like on Voice of the Deep, the higher parts are very lyrical soprano, for example, because I couldn't sing that high in like a belter voice. And then like the upcoming material that we have one song where I actually have like full-blown opera mezzo soprano parts, basically, like in the classic style. But that's just because the song favors that. And I think that some songs do and some songs don't. And usually Simon has like a style in mind when he writes it. He kind of says like, this is this voice of yours or that voice of yours. So
okay. Yeah, so are you planning on performing live, or are there any plans for that?
no. Not in the near future. I don't well, first of all, we are not a full band. Like we would actually have to hire musicians to do that because at the moment we produce everything ourselves, and then for some parts we hire session musicians, like for example for the guitars. So we don't actually have like a full band. It's just Simon and I. So from that perspective, um, I also we are both have jobs. We both have day life. You know, we're not doing this like full time yet. I would hope to do mostly music one day, but we're clearly not there yet. And also to be honest, I would probably like if I could pick, if like the god of musicians, like I could just have an audience and like pick what kind of band you want to be, I would probably go and be like Adele style, you know, like just do my stuff most of the time and then play like a couple of shows, you know, play a couple of big shows. I'm not interested in, at this point, this might change. Like, I mean, Avantasia started as a studio project and have been touring ever since. So never say never. But from like what I know I can do and what I know I can handle and what I'm proficient at, I don't think that we will ever be a fully touring band. That doesn't mean we wouldn't do like a live stream concert if we could figure out a way to do that, or play a concert if the opportunity came up. And also like I mean I don't think we ever really, like in the beginning we didn't even think about it because like this was in the height of lockdown, you know, like we were kind of like, no, we'll just make a song and put it on the internet. And I think that's gonna be our main focus for a while yet.
Yeah, it's amazing what's come out of this whole lockdown pandemic.
Yeah.
I interviewed a band from Belgium, and it's a husband and wife, and they were both professional athletes.
Oh, okay.
And then they got too old to be athletes, and you know,
yeah,
was beyond their prime. And they said they sat down one day and they said, well, what do we do now with our lives?
yeah.
And the guy said, let's start a band. And they very similar to you, and they started writing, and they put it out to their Facebook friends, and their friends all said, oh, they've got something here. And they took it to the producer in Brussels or somewhere.
Yeah.
And he said, this is great, you know, we can do something with this. And now they're saying, well, they think they need to start calling themselves musicians now. But
he's like, no.
There's all these stories that are coming out, you know, which is quite amazing. Which is,
I think it was like a really good time. Like it certainly like changed how I like my pace in life and what my focus is. Like a lot actually. Like I think like everybody's perspective just changed, and then some people are very lucky because they could use the time to sort of like create something new, because it's like when you're always busy, nothing comes out of you because you're always just too busy. Your head is like, you have to be a little bored almost, I want to say, to be creative. Like if you always keep every little inch of your brain busy, like you're not going to write anything. Like if I want to write lyrics, I basically just have to sit there and like stare at my sheet of paper and sort of like think and mull about, and like, but I can't, like I couldn't write lyrics listening to a podcast or to the radio, or like being busy in some other way, right? You have to have the time, or you have to make the space for other stuff to come up. And then I think it's quite amazing what comes up in people, actually, if you just kind of put them into a vacuum for a while and go like, okay, let's take away all of these inputs, right? Let's take away all of the stuff that the world is, like the crazy news cycles, the people, the office environment, the busy life. Yeah,
that's true. It's it's absolutely changed the way people. I mean, I used to travel a lot.
Yeah.
And that stopped.
Yeah.
And then
that was a bit of a bummer, though.
A friend of mine said, well, because I've been in the music industry as well, and producing and also managing bands, and, you know, producing stuff and working with the thing. And that all sort of started drying up and stopping and everything like that. And then a friend of mine said, well, Kai, why don't you start doing a radio show?
Yeah. And are you enjoying
and
that?
A year later, now I'm on 4 different stations. I mean,
that's really
crazy.
Cool, though.
Yeah, you don't know where your life's going to go.
Yeah, also that's like the biggest one, is like nobody predicted COVID, and like then we were just like, oh, this is gonna be over in a couple of weeks or something, is what I thought in the beginning. Like I certainly didn't think that I would still be dealing with how it affects the world like 3 years later almost, right? Or 2 years later, and we're still not back to normal. And it's only now like we're going to like, we're gonna have concerts again, and like some in the summer, but like who knows how that's gonna be in winter again. So, and everything changes. You have to adapt and like find a new way to do what we all like to do, is like to send our message out, and then for other people to hear us, right? Like, I mean, this is why we make music, or why we do these things, is because I want to say like, this is my story, and then you can say like, oh, I hear you, I know this story. And then I say like, I know this too. And that's basically what art is about. And I think you can kind of, it's super sad, and it was a super difficult time, I think. Especially, I'm actually glad that I wasn't a professional musician at the time.
Yeah.
You know, that my life did not in any way, like, I'm an accountant, you know, like, so you know, my life did not in any way depend on this on the world working in that way. And so I'm glad that I didn't have to deal with the effects of like that getting like taken away from me, because I think it was really, really terrifying for a lot of people, and for a lot of musicians must have been a really, really awful experience. And it's especially like if you're not like 21 and a half, you know, like the older you get. I mean, I'm 35, and I already think it's, or feel like it's hard to change sometimes. It's hard to sort of like get used to new things, you know. And that's only going to continue, basically. And so that was like, I was glad that I didn't have to deal with that fallout, that I could just approach it from the, okay, this is my first thing anyway, perspective. And then also, like a lot of things, it's kind of good from a sort of decision perspective when you have some constraints. Like touring was never an option. Playing live, looking for a live gig wasn't an option. Worrying about where are we going to find the people for a live gig, or to form like a proper band, or whatever you want to call it. Like, I mean, I think we're a proper band. We're more than one person. So, but that was never an option. So we never even had to kind of think about like, oh, do we want to go that route? It was always just like, I mean, at the time we started doing this, that was like the strictest lockdown period, where you were only allowed, in Germany anyway, you were only allowed to meet like one other person out of your household. right? So like we would have done something very illegal had we actually started a real band. Or like I don't want to say a real band, but like a traditional kind of 5 people, 6 people outfit. And we would have broken the law, you know, we would have gotten tickets and stuff. So like that was never an option. And that made it easier also not to think about it, right? It saved us at least one imposter complex, I want to say. At the very least, the thoughts of like, oh, we can't do this because we don't have 5 other people, basically, which definitely was a thing the first time we made music. It was still like, oh my God, how do you do this without 50 gazillion people, right? And the second time it was like everybody was by themselves. So you just do, basically.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, you just got to learn to adapt.
Yeah.
And work within those constraints. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's like for me, I like honestly, like I admire touring musicians. I don't think my body could handle that, to be honest. Like it's very physically demanding. Like even just singing, like just recording, it's like I do an hour or 2 of recording, I'm beat, basically, just like physically exhausted. And I see people who like, you know, do this for years and years and years and years, and I'm like, wow, like physically that is such an endurance test, basically. So I don't know. I hope that by the time it like it gets time to play concert, like if once that arrives, I think I'm also going to be physically capable. I mean, you get better, right? Like you get better, you get stronger as you practice.
Yeah, look at the Rolling Stones. Look at Keith Richards.
Yeah. He wasn't, I mean, he didn't like just pop out of the womb and was Keith Richards, I'm sure. You know.
You know what they're saying? We've got to start thinking about what world we're going to leave Keith Richards. Because the human race is going to be extinct and he'll still be hanging
like
around.
Before he goes. But like that's good for him though, right? Like it's a blessing, I think, also. Like if that's what you're called to do.
Yeah. There's something I like to do on an interview.
Okay, your favorite test. Go ahead.
10 questions.
Okay.
Very easy. First thing that comes into your head.
Okay. Oh, fries, potatoes. Definitely potatoes. At the moment, Paris. Don't have one. I don't play favorites with my music. Blue. Constantine. That depends on the time of day. Cats. Cat. Meryl Streep. What they're called? Mint juleps. Mint juleps. That's a trick question. I'm not gonna answer that one.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think we've got more than enough to work with here. What was I going to ask now? I've forgotten. It's quite late.
Well, I was gonna ask you, like, what is your favorite song off of the album? Since you're like one of 5 people on the whole planet who have listened to all of it, I think.
To be honest, I like Emerald, and I like Look at Your Face.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's good. I think most people like those.
Yeah. So
I always say that like the Emerald Divide is like our user-friendly song because it's like anyone can enjoy a piano ballad, even if you're
Yeah,
not into rock stuff.
yeah, I suppose it's also, it depends on the time of day as well.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
at the moment, there's so much music that's being released.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the PR agencies are just, every night I'm getting 10, 15
Wow.
songs coming in, bands coming in. And I've got like before I'd like, oh, I've got to give them a chance, got to give them a chance. Now
Yeah.
I listen to a snippet. The minute I hear any growling, I say, right, well, that's out.
I don't like that. Yeah.
Don't like that. If I suddenly hear that, that's out, that's out. And, yeah, so it's.
So what made you listen to like more than a snippet of our album then? Now I'm curious. Like, what do you think?
I'll tell you honestly, it's just when I hear the voice and I hear, like, I'll just pick pieces out.
Yeah.
And if it resonates with me, then I'll think, I've got to listen more.
Okay. So it's kind of like a split second sort of.
Yeah, it literally resonates that, no, this sounds interesting, this sounds different. And your voice is very unique.
Yeah, I've come to appreciate that. It's like when you come from a classical perspective, it's not a good thing, like in classical education. But now I actually like appreciate that I sound like me, at least most of the time.
And I mean, I got, you submitted your music to Steve Jackson at Call.
Yeah, he reached out to me, exactly. Like he was the first one.
Yeah, and then he always sends me stuff as well. So over the years now, he knows what I like. So he filters already most of the stuff, and he thinks, "Oh, Kyle will like this," and you were in the batch that works. And I'm a firm believer in the universe. I've had, there's a time, everything will happen for a reason at a certain time. I'm a firm believer of that. I've had
I believe that too.
I've had so many instances of that in my life that you just know, And that's,
or sometimes like you hear what you need to hear, like you find the right song or the right book or the right whatever, and it just really,
or you meet the right person, or whatever. Yeah.
And sometimes it takes like 15 years to pay off, like as in our case. Sometimes the universe is a bit slow, but it always works out.
But it always comes right in the end.
It comes right. Like, I think we couldn't have, honestly, like, if I had, so here's a funny thing. I remember, like, in classical music, or even if you were raised in music education, like, you're under this time pressure, right? You're sort of like, you're kind of always confronted with a child prodigy, where if you're not an absolute genius by the time you're 10, you're basically wasting your time. Then if you are not a genius by the time like you're 15, you're wasting your time. And this is like kind of what you see, and nobody ever tells you like how much luck goes into that. Nobody ever tells you like, like it's kind of like being in the ballet as well. Like the system is built on telling a lot of kids that they're not good enough. Right? Because it's you're competing on execution in classical music because the music is already written, right? So you're basically only competing on perfection, not on uniqueness necessarily. I mean, there are unique voices and things, but still, there's a certain style, there's a certain thing. You have very close parameters, so that can leave you pretty, or left me pretty messed up, right? Like I had a very kind of difficult relationship with music for the longest time. I loved music, but I didn't enjoy being under that pressure. And I remember that like all I wanted was to be in a band. But I did not know, like, I mean, I was this classical music. I didn't know what a band was. Like, how do you find a band? Like, it never occurred to me that you just make one, right? So I remember very seriously as like a 19-year-old explaining to my dad how I was already too old to basically make it in music, because I was like, well, if you want to make it, you kind of have to be really good and really discovered and like really get going at a very early age. And now I'm like 19 or I'm 20. That's never going to happen to me, right? And it never occurred to me somehow that I could discover myself, that I didn't have to wait for someone to kind of find me. And precious little did I do for anyone to find me anyway. Like, I lived in the middle of nowhere. I'm from like Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which is like the emptiest part in Germany where nothing ever happens. Like, who was gonna find me, right? So and I remember like having this despair, and sort of like not it until my 30s did I realize that you don't wait for people to choose you, you choose you, right? Like, I say I'm a metal vocalist and I sing symphonic metal music by default. That means I'm a metal vocalist, and it doesn't matter if someone hears me or someone picks me. I mean, it's very nice. I love when people like hear the music, and I adore when like someone really likes a song, especially if it's one of the less obvious ones. So that always like gives me like the it's just like, I'm so glad this spoke to you kind of feeling. But it didn't occur to me until much later that you pick yourself, you do the thing, and that all the people who are out there doing it just started doing music one day, and like they just didn't stop. They did not stop until they got where they wanted to be, and that's basically what you do. And like my personal motto for like my marketing plan is basically like fewer crickets every time. It's just like if I have like if I have a few more people listening to the music every time, then I'm good, that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Like then it's working. And so I remember like, yeah, I'm too old for at 19. At 19, I'm too old for being in a band. This is never going to happen. And then at 35, I just start a band myself, right? Which is really cool, I think. And the other thing is like, even if I had been discovered like at 19, I don't think I would have handled it very well. Like, it's like, I think it was good that it took this time, because it's like now I'm like a healthy person without all of the imposter complex and without all of the like, I'm not good enough, this is not good enough. Like, I think the reason we didn't do more with our music the first time around was literally just because we bought into the this is not good enough and it's never going to be good enough kind of story. And we weren't willing to kind of go like, okay, so like let's make it a tiny bit better and then like just do the next one, right? Because like our first album, it's not perfect. It's certainly not perfectly produced. You can't compare it to like a production, like a Within Temptation production or something like that. Not at all, because it's like two people, right? Making that. And then yes, we had a professional mastering engineer who did a lot for the album. Like, it made it so much better. But still, it's nothing compared to like, I don't know how Blind Guardian produces their album or something like that. It's very different. So you can't really compare that. And 10 years ago, we would have said, well, it's not as good as Within Temptation, so we're not releasing it. It's not as perfect. And now we're just willing to like, just, make our way imperfectly, and sort of like, I think strangely enough, or not strangely enough, it's I think like people still like, what was very healing for me was to see that, oh, people still enjoy my music, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not like, Within Temptation or something like that. And also, besides, Within Temptation already is Within Temptation, like,
Yeah. But bands like that also had to start at the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. They were not like that always.
They didn't go in one day and there it was. It took years.
It took years. And also like I mean, like with a little bit of a background in digital marketing, I actually know kind of like what the sort of like eyeballs to success ratio is like, and that it's really all about, it's like if not many people listen to your music, it's not because the music isn't good, it's because you haven't shown it to very many people. And finding ways to show it to very many people kind of like effectively, it's something that I'm still working on, but that is basically like, I know that like if someone releases something on a major label, they just have the option, like they have the possibility to just show it to very many people. Right? And that's what makes it good or different, or like what makes it work, basically. And now, I mean, we live in the best times. Like the internet is godsend. Like, I mean, I think it's a wreck for like bigger musicians, for bigger traditional musicians. Certainly, a lot of their things changed. But I think for smaller musicians, it's like, yeah, I would certainly have not gotten this in front of you if it weren't for the internet.
Well, exactly that, because the whole market has changed. Like you were saying, you know, the big record labels well, I'm not going to tell you how long ago it was, but it was a very long time ago when I played in the band. And we still had those things that were flat, you know, the big flat round thing.
Yeah, LPs. Wow. But I hope to get I actually want to make a vinyl one day. It's like one of the goals, to have a vinyl campaign that works out.
It was, you know, if you didn't have anyone at your gig, that was it.
Yeah.
You know, now, I mean, we've pushed out artists and we're finding artists all over the world. You know, people come to me and they say, oh, the music's dead, the music's crap nowadays. And I'm saying, well, you're not looking in the right places. Because if you're listening to commercial radio, then yes, there is a lot of rubbish.
Yeah.
But go into the world of the internet, go onto YouTube, listen to some internet radio stations, of which there are thousands and thousands.
Yes.
And you'll suddenly find there are masses of bands out there, masses of talented people, all still singing with their own voices, all still playing their own instruments, you know.
Yeah, and
I think it's actually, I think now, in the last year, I'm saying music is so alive and well. And like I say, maybe not all of it's perfect, but the Beatles weren't perfect.
Oh no, my God, I think they were terrible in the beginning. They even said that about themselves. And I've learned that it's mostly about audacity. It's like you just start and you don't stop, even if your brain tells you otherwise. Like I have days where I love my music, and honestly, recording your own vocals and then like having to listen to them is a very humbling experience. So I also have days where I'm like, God, you can't sing for crap. Like seriously, you sound like shit. Right? Like where I just can't listen to my own voice, and I think it's horrible, absolutely terrible. And the interesting thing is that always when I feel like really good singing, it sounds horrible. Horrible. Like there's something about when you like get too passionate about it that makes it really awful. It's kind of like just singing drunk. So I've had to learn that just because I feel good or bad about something. Like equally, like I've had sessions where I did not feel good about, like, you know, I didn't think it was a good day vocally, and I got lots of good material. So like can't really it's a very humbling experience, but so like your brain will tell you like you need to stop. You can't keep doing this. You can't sing, like this is crap, basically. And you certainly can't do it by yourself, and like you need a proper studio and a proper everything and whatever. And honestly, I think all of those things are very nice, and I would love it to have like, I don't know, just 5 audio technicians just flittering about me and never have to touch a cable again in my life. But at the moment, that's not my reality. And like, I want to have the music more than I want to not be afraid.
Yeah, and you mustn't be afraid of being imperfect, because in a vocal, sometimes it's a bit of the imperfection that's actually the best part. I mean,
It's like
to give you an example, this is how the universe works. I don't know if you remember a band called Uriah Heep.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, they're a very big band in the 70s, 80s. And that was when I was playing. And the one night I came home from a gig and I looked at the album cover and I looked at the keyboard player and I said, you might not know this, but I'm going to be working with you one day. 35 years later, I was in Spain with a vocalist and we were recording an album with Ken in his studio. It took 35 years to get there. And Ken taught me a lot about recording vocals. And the one thing he refused to touch, and he wouldn't let his engineer touch, was auto-tune.
Yeah. It's just like, don't.
If you're going to sing the song and you can't get that note, make sure you can't get that note even when you do it live, because that is how it is.
Yeah.
You know, so even if it's not perfect, just change it so it becomes nearly perfect. But that's your identity. Otherwise, otherwise you have a machine. You know.
Sometimes, like, you end up doing something really pretty quite by accident, right?
Yeah.
Like where it's usually like often the parts that often Simon likes takes that I want to cut, right? Like if I'm not like a very good judge, basically. I think nobody is a very good judge for their own vocals. So I've kind of I used to comp by myself and now we do it together, because I used to do like a comp and then he wouldn't like it. And then I'd have to redo everything. So now I just record like the takes and then we look at it together. And very often, like what I dislike, he will be like, no, this is perfect. And most of the time he's right. Like I want to say 9 out of 10 cases he's right. And then there's the one where even like in the final mix I say, like, I'm sorry, we have to use a different one. And that's usually, for me, it's something when I can hear, and I think that's the classically trained singer in me, when I can kind of like hear that it's not placed very well or something like that. And basically like my voice aches when I hear it, right? Where I go like, oh, that's not like a nice way to do it, like my jaw clenches or something. Then I have to replace that take. But it's usually like one note or something. Sometimes where I go, that vowel shape still bothers me, because often like what bothers you in the beginning doesn't bother you in the end. Like it's very often, you can't really judge it too early, I want to say. Like sometimes you make it and then you kind of go like, oh, this sounds rather crappy, and then you put it in the mix and it's like, whoop, magic somehow. So it's a crazy process somehow, and you never know at what stage like the alchemy is gonna happen. Like I've had things that sounded sort of crappy to me until they got mastered, and then I was convinced it was the most brilliant thing ever, you know, because suddenly it just worked.
And then you go away and you listen to it 5 days later and you think it's crap.
Yeah, you can't, like, you just can't. It's like I can listen to the first album now, right? And I can listen to it pretty much without getting a twitch in my eyebrow or something like that, you know, like I can listen to all of it. There are 2 notes on the whole album that if we were to re-release it, I would change. 2 notes. There's one in Straight at Its Face that bothers me still, even after listening, like just one. There's a single one where also I think it was like the worst take out of all the takes, out of all the times I ever sang this note. This was the crappiest time that we ended up using. And it was just because I had technical difficulties recording at the time, so nothing else was usable basically. And it was like, I'm not going to redo this whole thing. So there's one there, and there's one in Flea, similar issue though. But it's very tiny. It's tiny. Nobody can hear it except me, and it's just because I know it's there. And all the other things that I thought bothered me, like after now, like it's been out for like, I don't know, finished for like 6, 7 months or something. It like I didn't listen to it. Um, After we released it, I didn't really listen to it until we got the actual physical CDs made. So that was like 3 months later or something. And so like once we got the CDs, I could listen to it again. And now I can listen to it. It's almost like someone else's music. Whilst on the stuff that we're working on right now, very hard to listen to. Like while you're working on it, it's very difficult for me to listen to my own vocals, like kind of go. And also like, I mean, the unfortunate thing is that your ears improve as you learn. So like stuff that I didn't hear before, stuff that didn't bother me, now I hear it. So,
I know.
but you cannot let
too
that
well.
stop you. You just have to like, I know that I am not judging this. Like I am not in the business of like, that's not my job. I sing, I record the stuff, I put it together, but I don't think anyone is a great judge of your own art. I think we're too close to it. Because
Correct.
the things that we like the most, like my favorite song of the album is actually Ironos, is the one that brings me to tears every time, even though it is not a sad song. But there's this one part in Ironos, like the slow chorus on like the fourth part, where I'm close to tears every time. And it's ridiculous because it's about a sentient fortress. It's about like a castle that rises from the ground to do battle, and it's nothing like it's not a sad thing basically. But all the while I'm singing this, I'm thinking about like this poor castle. Nobody knows it's alive, and it probably feels very lonely because like they only come to Ironos when they want something from it, and nobody probably has spoken to it like for the last 1,000 years. Just this whole thing goes off in my head every time, right? So that's one of my favorite parts of the album, which is completely like unrelated to what everybody else likes, basically. Although I do like Emerald Divide too. It's a very
Yeah.
it's a very good song.
Okay. All right. Well,
yeah,
it's been very nice chatting with you, and I could spend a long time as well, but talking to you because one of the girls that I still look after, she's just like you when it comes to recording vocals.
Yeah.
She actually drives engineers and producers and myself. No one wants to go into the studio when she's doing her vocals.
Is she like very anxious about it?
No, she is just too exact.
Okay.
We had to reconstruct pretty much half a song and re-record drums because somewhere she got stuck in her brain. There was a half note of a cymbal that clashed with her vocal.
Yeah, I keep my hands away from that, and I'm just kind of like, that's Simon's business.
We said, well, we can't. We're not going to record the whole drum track. We're not going to bring the drummers in again to do the whole thing over because there's a half note that clashes with your vocal. Then we rather change the vocal. And then there's just this huge argument. And
yeah, no, I don't do that. I just like I just record the best I can and then let Simon sort it out, basically. It's like, because I know I'm not good at judging that, and I also know that how I feel about it has nothing to do, it doesn't correlate with the result. Right? Like it's just because I feel crap about it doesn't mean it's gonna be ugly, and vice versa. If I feel good about it doesn't mean it's gonna be great. Like so I basically try not to get too anxious about it. It's now only like from a technical perspective, and then I will actually take it to my singing teacher, right? I'll just take it to someone else and be like, or my husband, or someone who's sort of like fresh pair of ears, or even like our mastering engineer Miro, where I'll just ask him like, can you hear that too? Does it bother you? And then also like Simon, actually, it's almost like sometimes I feel like I'm the face of the band, but I'm also an instrument in the band. Like he is very precise about direction, so he actually also directs me, like, and sometimes he has a very specific thing that he's looking for. So it's not like I don't want to say I don't get to do like the vocals the way I want to, but it's definitely I do what I think is good or what I think the song needs, but he has the final, like he adjusts me, like he would adjust, like any other instrument basically, and it works really, really well because it takes a lot of the pressure off of me in terms of like, how does this need to be? And of course, I'm much more particular with the songs where I have written most of the songs, right? Like, then like, so for me, the ones that he wrote are easier to record than the ones that I wrote because I'm much more, like with the ones that I wrote, I have like much more of a thing in my head of how I wanted it to sound. But sometimes it's just not there. Like, for example, I spent like 2 days or so trying to record the very high chorus part of the Emerald, not the Emerald, of Voice of the Deep. There are some high notes. And I know that like a classical soprano sounds darker on those high notes, like much darker. And I sounded very bright when on these high notes. And I was like, I want to see if with some technique I can make this darker. Because like a soprano singing in that range sounds more like an alto, basically, actually. Like it's a much rounder, darker shape. So I tried for like a day or two and like took it to my singing teacher. And it's not there. I don't have that kind of voice in that range. Right? Like no matter what I do, like my timbre is not such. I'm a mezzo, so like for me, an F up there is high, and it's gonna sound high. It can still sound pretty, but it's always gonna sound high and bright. So I was like, okay, so clearly I don't have that, what I'm looking for. So like then I either leave it stand or I have someone else sing the song, right? Like that's always an option. And I mean, like for some parts we did that. Like on Flea, we have a second vocalist who is actually professional. She's a professional soprano. She makes her money. Like she is like a actual theater at the opera soprano. And so like she has this dark quality for that villain bit in Flea that we were looking for, where it's like never in a million years could I have sung that. And with 1,000 singing lessons, not because that's not how I sound. And sometimes it's just not there. And then you have to take the best you have. And as I said, my rule now is like, if in the end, after the distance, like after having distance by the end of sort of like mastering and stuff, if it really bothers me, I'll ask for like a revision, but it's rare. It's rare. And even with the 2 notes on the first album, I can live. Like it's fine. 2 notes out of like a million, it's not a problem. It's really, I think it's okay.
I think it's bloody marvelous.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, it was really nice to meet you and to chat. And then please stay in touch when you're releasing new music.
Yeah, I think we have something come out. I don't want to say like soon. I know because I don't know. Like we have 2 songs of the next one finished of the next album, but you never know. Like the dream was to do like the next one, like also within a year, but I don't know if we can make that. It depends on just like, it's not just us, it's actually like mostly the bottleneck is me, because like I only have so much time with the day job and everything. And so it's slow going basically, but I think we're going to have something in a couple of weeks.
That's soon.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, at least sort of like a single, I think we will have in a couple of weeks, maybe 2 months or so. Depends a little bit on the schedule, because like the way Simon makes me record them, he likes to kind of do the similar ones, like songs that have a similar flavor, like all the up-tempo numbers and then all the ballads. So we'll see how that goes. I still hope to be finished this year, but you never know.
You never know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like I could fall ill tomorrow and basically like not be able to sing for like 3 months or something like that. It happens. Like that's something that I've also had to learn, that the voice is like it's a physical thing, it's a physical skill. So all the variance that you have within your body applies, right? It's not like a piano that sounds like the same-ish every day. Like, you know, if I touch your key today, it's going to sound like this. And then if I touch the same key tomorrow, it's going to sound roughly the same. A voice does not work like that. So, but yeah, no, I'll definitely stay in contact, and maybe I'll send you an email because I'd be interested, like if there are any other people that I might show the music to, that you
Yeah,
know, right?
yeah.
So that I can build like a little bit of a contact list
No,
to
absolutely.
for my Fewer Crickets project.
I've got a long list of, well, I wouldn't say it's a long list, but I've got a list of guys we can push the music to. And you might have already, I don't know who you've approached.
I've approached some of the recommendations, like most of the recommendations that Steve gave me, and they all played it. But I think I need to be a bit more active still in following up on those things.
Yeah, yeah. You can't keep your foot off the accelerator pedal.
Yeah, it's difficult. I want an assistant. It's really like it's really, I think that's the problem when you're doing it all yourself, is basically that it's all you. But I also think it's like anything I can do is better than nothing. So
well, and yeah, you just, who knows, you know, there's a lucky break anywhere.
Yeah, you never know, and you're never gonna get anywhere if you don't show anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
So
what do they say? If you don't throw a line in the water, you'll never catch a fish.
yeah, it's true. It's true.
It's easy
And
as
like,
that.
look at what just happened to Kate Bush. So
Well,
I want to be Kate Bush. I don't actually care if it takes 20 years.
yeah, but I mean, that's really interesting that a lot of that music from my age is now coming back into fashion again.
I think it's a really, really good thing, because it's like it really informs, you know, like I mean, everything comes back into fashion. It's the same in like literature, you know, like every now and then we'll have a science fiction craze or a vampire craze or a zombie craze or whatever. But I think it's good because then you can sort of like also learn and make something new, I think, because we all just stand on the shoulders of like other people, right? And I think sometimes it's like, I think with music and music education, I think it's like the broader you listen, almost the better, because it's like what you then make, like we made a symphonic metal album, and that's like the tip of the iceberg, right? And you don't know all of the influences that went in there, like all of the things that I have listened to throughout the years, everything that Simon has listened to throughout the years. And I like, you can't tell in the album, like you only see the tip of the iceberg, but the iceberg still has to be there. Like it still has to be there even if you can't see it, to make it good, because else you just have like an ice würfel, right?
I like the way you're talking about an iceberg, because with my show being called From the Iceberg, it's exactly that.
Yeah.
No, I'm being serious.
That's why you chose that, right?
The iceberg. Because people only ever see the tip of the iceberg. You never see the whole iceberg. And that's what I believe music is.
Yeah, and I think it has to be there. Like the stories behind it have to be there. It's like sometimes they have like a whole book in my head, like about a 3-minute song, right? Like where it's like Emerald Divide is like much more than the song. It's a whole story. It's like a whole massive thing. And you get like this tiny piece, this tiny sort of like window into what happened. And I think it's good that the other stuff is still there. It has to be there, sort of, because else you kind of only get half of the story. Like it's kind of like I have the story, I need to know and I need to believe the story, and then I can like sing the 3-minute thing and make it sound like it's supposed to. But if I don't know, then I don't know what I'm doing. It's kind of like, I mean, the voice also, it's like you don't have any direct control. You always need like visualization in your head to actually even make it do things. So having a story for a song, or having like knowing what you're doing, basically. And I do that with classical music too. I once had to sing like the Ave Maria at a wedding, and I kind of like looked into like, what does that actually mean? Like, why do we even sing this song? Why do we pray to Maria? Like, what's the deal here? And it made it much more fun to sing as well, because it's like what it came out to me, like the Ave Maria specifically for me was just like, okay, so like even very powerful men still write songs to their moms, right? And like that's still kind of what it comes down to, is like when something hurts, we still want our mom. And that's what that song is about for me, right? Like that's why we could sing to Jesus or to God or to whomever, right? Like, but we choose her at the wedding, on the, like everywhere. And so no, we want our mom in the room. So that's how I chose to look at it, basically. And that made it much more fun to sing than just like, oh, I'm just gonna do this song that like everybody always requests, right? And I think for my own music, it's the same. Like you have to have the Iceberg, because else, yeah, you what do you have? An ice cube.